It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast, breaking down for you the property market. Yes, piece by piece. It's your weekly window into the Australian real estate market. And if you've got a friend who is trying to learn more about this current Aussie property market, be sure to let them know about us. We want to include as many people, which includes buyers, sellers and enthusiasts, people just wanting to load themselves up on property information, because this is the place to get all of your property news and info from, because I'm in a very privileged position because I am talking to all of the experts around the country. So you don't need to dial into any other podcast. It is all right here on our Tuesday morning. It is May the 26th. I see that Lenny Kravitz is celebrating his birthday, turning 62. And a woman that I was in love with many, many years ago, who I actually got to meet. It was in one of those meet and greet situations backstage after a concert. I'm talking about Stevie Nicks. I'm normally sort of not lost for words, but yeah, I was just sort of staring and shaking her hand. She is celebrating 78 today. And it was also on this day, back in 1983, the Sydney Harbour Tunnel project officially moves into major planning stages. And on this day in 2004, the final episode of the television show Friends was aired. And I have never watched a single episode. How sad is that? All right, let's catch up right now with Brendon Ptolome from Herron Todd White. And a very good morning to you, Brendon. Welcome on to the Real Estate Breakfast. Were you a Friends fan?
Morning, Craig. Thanks for having me on. We're kindred spirits. I've never watched a day of Friends or an episode either, but I did once in New York a few years ago get dragged by my family to go and see the building that was the feature of Friends.
Oh, right. Okay. No, well, I haven't even seen the building, so you're one up on me. And before we talk shop with real estate, you love your West Eagles, the AFL, although they're in a bit of a rebuilding phase, aren't they? What's going on with this team?
Yeah, we're struggling along in a rebuilding phase at the bottom of the ladder while our crosstown rivals are going in the other direction. They're probably going to make the grand final this year. So a little bit of pain for us West Coast Eagles fans this year.
All right, so go the West Eagles. Good luck for the rest of the season. Now, we should talk about CGT and what you are seeing around this, because we have kind of digested this. It's been, almost 2 weeks since the announcement was made. What are you seeing?
This is really interesting, Craig, because the evolution of the information coming out, almost the drip feed, plus the sell job that needs to be done by the government. We've just had a slightly different story each day about the effects of the CGT changes on property investors across the country. That CGT rate will change, obviously, from its current concoction of essentially there being a 50% discount rate for people that have held a property for longer than 12 months, whether that's owner-occupier or investor. But in particular, we're worried about the investor side of things here, where the rate of tax will go up as of 1st of July 2027, based on the proposal from the government. And what I'd picked up on here, Craig, is the government started their sell job with the concept that this would make it easier for first home buyers to get into our marketplace, essentially on the concept that investors wouldn't like this CGT proposal, and so they might think about selling their investment properties around the country. And what we're probably concerned about there is, in terms of that concept, is, if anything, the looming higher tax rate might actually make investors sit on their hands and hold the property for longer, and actually have the opposite effect, essentially mean that there's less supply in our marketplace because existing investors retain their investment property and don't release it to the market.
And what about the negative gearing? What are your thoughts around what you're seeing with relation to that?
Yeah, so this is another concept from the federal government, and I guess everyone needs to remember that this is proposed legislation at this point in time. But essentially what they're talking about is cancelling the concept of negative gearing that comes against your income each year. So once you do your tax return, if you're making a cash flow loss essentially against an investment property, you can offset that loss against your income. And in the world that we live in property valuation, we do a lot of work for the financial institutions. And so what we're doing at the moment is waiting for them to provide an indication of how they'll treat that income in loan applications and loan assessments on the income side of things. So both Macquarie and Westpac have already made announcements that they will adjust their loan approval settings based on the cancellation essentially of negative gearing. And that is going to affect property investors' ability to borrow. And we think this is probably going to have the biggest effect on the marketplace. You could be taking out a large swathe of investors that qualified at a certain value level, given their current cash flow settings. They may even have pre-approval in place to go and transact property, and they might find that those financial institutions will no longer maybe honour that pre-approval, or in fact, the financial plans that investor might have had will be undermined by the fact they can't utilise the negative gearing settings into the future.
Yeah, this is a double whammy for Perth, because we were in Perth yesterday morning, but I want to drill down on the investors that you're talking about, because it has been a fantastic time for Perth with investors coming from Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. That balance of those investors to continue coming into Perth, yes, there have been a number of investors pivoting, moving out of Perth and going into the likes of Melbourne. But how concerning is all of what you're talking about for those investors to keep coming into Perth based on the budget stuff?
Yeah, so Craig, what we're probably concerned about there is just the effect of removing a segment of our market. So the investors essentially exiting potentially the Perth market. Now, just to remind everyone, the stats say that we've had about 24% increase in value over the last 12 months, and on the average or the median house price, which now sits around about $1 million. And if I can drill down into the southeast corridor of Perth, so down into suburbs like Armidale, what we saw is investors from those capital cities up and down the east coast coming into our marketplace. And some of those scenarios would be that they may have purchased through, say, a buyer agent a couple of years ago. They would have paid in the order of $300,000 to $400,000 for a single residential dwelling on a site down there. The value of that type of product now is pretty much doubled. They're at now $600,000, $700,000. And so what we're just trying to think through in terms of scenario testing this is, will those investors exit our market and increase our supply and potentially making that marketplace slightly vulnerable to value correction? Or will they hold knowing that they've made that gain and they don't want to realise capital gains tax? Now, the other thing that's underpinning their investment is the fact that rents are still really healthy in right across Perth, and in particular in those locations. So as an investor, the reason you bought that property is to gain a return, and that return remains healthy and is probably increasing. So we'll wait to see what happens in terms of their investment strategy.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're talking to Brendon this morning. When we come back, we're going to, what is the RBA likely to do for the rest of the year? This is the speculating game that everybody is into. We'll talk about that after this.
Don't forget to subscribe. We have so many episodes, all designed to help you better understand the constantly evolving and dynamically changing real estate property market.
It's been an interesting ride, really. So when we got to this house, it obviously needed to be fully renovated, and we've been living here throughout. So it's been a little bit challenging. We've had to be creative with the way that we live. We're currently actually washing up in the laundry, so it's been a bit of a challenge, but we're slowly getting there. 5 months down the track, and we're probably finished in a month. I'd say 2 months.
Aren't you quite close to the beach where you are?
Yeah, so we're about 5 minutes from the beach, and we have beautiful views from upstairs, so we can actually see out to Manly.
So you haven't been falling in love with this property. In other words, starting to think, gee, do we really want to flip this property? Perhaps we should keep it.
Yes,
I suppose that's always the challenge, especially when you put your touch to it. You tend to fall in love with the property, but I think in the long run, it would be silly for us not to. But certainly, yes, we do get attached.
We dive deep into topics like buying, selling, investing, and maximising your property's value, from mortgage advice to the latest property data and trending numbers. Your real estate journey starts here.
I would like to advise a lot of sellers in the market. We get the question all the time, is it too early to take an offer? I would say in our market right now, it's never too early to take an offer. So as an owner, be prepared that you will find your buyer in the first 1 to 2 open homes. You definitely want to take advantage of negotiating quite quickly in a market that is oversupplied to make sure that you're getting the most premium outcome for your home.
Hey, let's have a look at a little bit of a flashback here, back through to the 1990s, and we go to the Sunshine Coast. Noosa was still viewed largely, and this is the 1990s, as a relaxed holiday destination rather than the prestige lifestyle market that it is today. Waterfront homes, Hastings Street apartments and beachside properties were considered expensive at the time, yet compared to current values, they now look incredibly affordable. Much of Noosa's long-term growth story was driven by limited land supply, strict planning controls. Man, this has been a real ongoing issue with Noosa, and also interstate buyers discovering the lifestyle appeal of the region. Even in the 1990s, locals were already debating over overdevelopment, tourism pressure, and preserving Noosa's coastal identity for future generations. So that is a look back to Noosa during the 1990s. Let us look forward on our Tuesday morning. Brendon is with me, and let's talk about the RBA. This is the guessing game that everybody loves to play. Everybody's got an opinion. What is yours, Brendon, for what is likely to unfold for the rest of 2026, given the fact that June is fast approaching?
Very interesting times ahead here, Craig. We've been watching some of that new data come out in the last week or so. So last week was some interesting unemployment data going up across Australia. And so The Economist, on the back of that, the commentary became, is this enough data and information for the RBA to think about pausing rates into the future? So we're hoping that that means that there is some sort of discussion about potentially pause next time, wait and see what happens with macroeconomic data and things like the conflict in the Middle East, and then maybe we've got a view to only maybe one more interest rate rise for the rest of 2026, as opposed to the 2 that have been discussed more recently.
All right, we'll leave it there, Brendon. Thank you for your thoughts and for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. Enjoy your Tuesday.
Yeah, cheers, Craig. Thanks very much for having us.
Unlock the secrets of real estate and stay informed about the latest real estate buzz with hot market trends, emerging suburbs, and hidden gems.
Every time we see a first homeowner coming through, they've got mum and dad next to them helping out with deposits or on the actual title itself, because in your 25 to 30, you might be on $100,000. That's not going to get you, much of an apartment if you're looking in the inner city.
We heard 3 more loud explosions, which obviously is pointing to the fact that it isn't over, and we've got these to contend with. Hopefully we won't see any more, but it's a very worrying time at the moment, Craig.
And you wanted to make comment about changing the capital gains discount or threshold and what effect that is likely to have on the Perth property market.
Yeah, and I think just harking back to that earlier comment around, any small changes that you make, and I think you've just got to be very careful where changes are made, and would sort of caution governments of all persuasions to be very, very cautious when it comes to tinkering with taxation settings.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.